Please save me. I can't breathe." The words came as barely audible whispers from the feared Mafia boss's lips, his powerful frame suddenly fragile against the mahogany desk where he'd collapsed. Lucinda froze in the doorway, cleaning supplies still clutched in her trembling hands. Rain pounded against the mansion's windows like angry fists demanding entry, masking the sound of her footsteps as she cautiously approached the man who held the fate of half of New York in his weakening grasp. Jonathan Wright, the untouchable crime lord of the East Side, was dying right before her eyes. Lucinda had spent 2 years perfecting the art of invisibility within these walls, moving like a shadow through rooms where dangerous men plotted and schemed, never making eye contact, never speaking unless spoken to. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind. Stay invisible. Stay alive. The security cameras had been disabled. She'd noticed the blinking red lights go dark earlier that evening, had heard unfamiliar voices in the West Wing before the house fell into an unnatural silence. The realization hit her with cold certainty. This was no accident. Jonathan's fingers clawed desperately at his collar as his gaze locked onto hers. Recognition and something else. Desperation, perhaps, flashing across his features. "Help," he gasped, reaching toward her with a hand that had ordered countless deaths. The world seemed to narrow to this single moment of choice. Walk away, and let fate claim the monster who ruled through fear, or intervene and forever entangle her life with the darkness she'd tried so hard to avoid. Lucinda's hands moved before her mind decided. "Not the phone," Jonathan choked out, his eyes wild with panic as he gestured weakly toward the bar cabinet. "Blue vial. Inside the Degas painting. They'll be watching." His words dissolved into a fit of strangled coughing. The Degas, a ballet scene that seemed oddly delicate amidst the masculine opulence of Jonathan's study, swung open at her touch, to reveal a small safe with a fingerprint reader. Without hesitation, she grabbed Jonathan's hand and pressed his thumb against the scanner. Inside the case, nestled in velvet, sat a blue glass vial and a syringe, evidence of a man who lived with the constant specter of betrayal. Lucinda's nursing school training, abandoned when her mother fell ill, flooded back to her as she measured the clear liquid. The needle slid into his arm with practiced precision, her movements automatic as she monitored his pulse with her other hand, feeling it flutter erratically beneath her fingertips. "Stay with me," she whispered, surprising herself with words meant to comfort a man whose name struck terror throughout the city. Time seemed suspended as Jonathan's breathing gradually stabilized, the deathly pallor slowly receding from his face as whatever antidote he'd prepared did its work. His eyes never left her face, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Who?" she asked simply, her voice barely audible above the storm still raging outside, a single word that encompassed the enormity of what had just transpired. Someone powerful enough to breach his security had to be someone close to him. "My brother," he replied, the words laden with a lifetime of complicated history. His voice steadier now, but threaded with a vulnerability she would never have associated with the man who ruled New York's underworld. "James wants control of everything I've built." In the distance, car engines revved to life, headlights sweeping across the rain-lashed windows as vehicles pulled away from the mansion grounds. "They think I'm dead," Jonathan realized aloud, struggling to sit upright, a predatory gleam returning to his eyes. "You should be," Lucinda said, stepping back as she calculated how much time she had to pack her things and disappear before the consequences of her actions caught up with her. That dose would have killed anyone without immediate treatment. "You're not going anywhere," Jonathan stated, his voice regaining its customary authority as he rose unsteadily to his feet. "The moment you saved my life, you became the most valuable person in New York, and the most hunted." Lucinda's mind raced through scenarios, each more terrifying than the last, as the full weight of her impulsive act of mercy crashed down upon her shoulders. She had preserved the life of a man whose enemies were countless, whose own brother wanted him dead. 3 days, he continued, moving to a hidden panel in the wall that revealed a bank of security monitors, currently showing only static. "That's how long we have before James realizes his plan failed and returns to finish what he started." The rain had subsided to a gentle patter against the windows, dawn's first tentative light beginning to filter through the clouds as Jonathan led her through a corridor she'd never noticed before, hidden behind a bookshelf in his study. The passage was narrow, forcing them to walk single file. "Why did you help me?" he asked suddenly, pausing at a heavy metal door that required both a keycard and a retinal scan to open. "You could have let me die. Probably should have," given what you know about me, about my business. Lucinda considered lying, manufacturing some noble motivation that might ensure her safety, but something in his tone made her offer the uncomfortable truth instead. I'm a nurse, or was, before my mother got sick and the bills piled up. The suite that opened before them was nothing like the ostentatious display of wealth in the main house. Spartan, functional, with concrete walls and utilitarian furniture that spoke of preparation rather than comfort. My contingency plan, Jonathan explained, gesturing to the space. Security monitors lined one wall, showing not just the mansion grounds but various locations throughout the city. Restaurants, warehouses, street corners, all Jonathan's eyes and ears in his domain. A cabinet filled with medical supplies stood open. Your expertise is wasted changing sheets and dusting shelves, Jonathan observed, sinking into a chair positioned before the bank of monitors, his complexion still ashen despite the antidote. How much does my brother pay the agency for your services? Not enough to die for, Lucinda replied with unexpected boldness, her fear giving way to a simmering anger as the reality of her situation became clearer. Not enough to become collateral damage in your family feud. Jonathan's laugh was unexpected, a genuine sound of amusement that transformed his face, softening the hard lines and briefly revealing a glimpse of the man he might have been under different circumstances. Then name your price, Lucinda Ross. I don't want your money, she said, the words surprising her even as they left her mouth, a plan forming rapidly as she assessed her unexpected leverage. I want protection. Not just for me, but for my mother in the assisted living facility on Westbrook Avenue. Jonathan's eyes narrowed, calculation replacing amusement as he studied her with renewed interest, as if recalibrating his assessment of the quiet maid who had shown more courage and resourcefulness in one night than many of his most trusted lieutenants. You have it. And when this is over, when you've dealt with your brother and whoever else was involved, I want out. New identities, enough money to start fresh somewhere far from New York, and a guarantee that no one comes looking for us. The demands tumbled from her lips before she could reconsider. Ambitious for a housemaid, Jonathan remarked, but there was no mockery in his tone, only a curious respect as he extended his hand to seal their unlikely pact. But then again, you're not just a housemaid anymore, are you? The next morning brought a transformation so complete that Lucinda barely recognized the mansion she'd cleaned for 2 years. Half the staff dismissed, security doubled, and James Wright's portrait removed from the main hall, where it had hung opposite his brother's. Jonathan moved through the house like a ghost. They used thallium, Jonathan explained later, sliding a toxicology report across the table in the secure room that had become their headquarters. Slow-acting, difficult to detect, and nearly impossible to treat without specific knowledge of the poison. Lucinda studied the report, memories of toxicology lectures resurfacing as she recognized the symptoms that had nearly claimed Jonathan's life. This isn't an amateur's poison. It's expensive, difficult to obtain, and requires expertise to administer properly. Outside the bulletproof windows of their sanctuary, autumn leaves swirled across the immaculate gardens, a stark contrast to the tension that filled the room as Jonathan pulled up surveillance footage on one of the many monitors. This is Dr. Wells, my personal physician for the past 5 years. The footage showed a distinguished gray-haired man entering Jonathan's study hours before the poisoning, placing something in the crystal decanter that always held Jonathan's evening whiskey. His movements were unhurried, confident, a man who believed himself unobserved. You need to call the police, Lucinda suggested, knowing even as she spoke that her words would fall on deaf ears, that men like Jonathan Wright operated outside the boundaries of ordinary justice. The laugh that met her suggestion confirmed her suspicions. The police are firmly in my brother's pocket, have been for years, Jonathan replied, pulling up another screen showing financial transfers to several high-ranking officials in the NYPD. No, this will be handled my way, with one important difference. Lucinda felt ice form in her veins at his words, at the implication of being drawn further into his dark world, rather than maintaining the distance their agreement had promised. I'm not a part of your vendetta. I saved your life. That doesn't make me your accomplice. Jonathan's eyes softened unexpectedly, genuine regret flickering across his features as he reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of touching hers. Not an accomplice, a witness. James doesn't know you saved me, doesn't know I'm aware of his betrayal. The plan, as Jonathan outlined it, was elegant in its simplicity. A family dinner, a prodigal brother returned from the dead, and the quiet maid who would serve the meals while wearing a recording device designed to capture James's inevitable confession. No bloodshed, no violence, just the truth exposed. "And if he recognizes me from the security footage?" Lucinda asked, the practical question cutting through Jonathan's carefully constructed scenario. "If he realizes I was there that night, that I'm the reason you're still breathing?" Jonathan's smile was cold, calculated, a reminder of exactly who she'd aligned herself with in this dangerous game. "Then I'll do what I've always done, protect what's mine. And for now, Lucinda Ross, that includes you." Days passed in a strange limbo as they prepared, Jonathan teaching her the intricacies of his family's dynamics while she monitored his recovery, an unlikely partnership forming through hours of proximity. She learned that the brothers had once been inseparable. He was always the planner, I was the doer, Jonathan explained one evening, his guard lowered by fatigue, and perhaps the 2 fingers of whiskey he'd allowed himself, despite her medical objections. "Our father recognized that, put me in charge because James could never make the hard decisions." The invitation was delivered by courier the following morning, an elaborate card requesting Jonathan's presence at James's penthouse for a celebration of new beginnings. The irony wasn't lost on either of them as Lucinda helped Jonathan into his impeccably tailored suit. "Remember, no matter what happens tonight, our agreement stands," Jonathan assured her, his hand capturing hers in a gesture that felt strangely intimate after days of careful distance. "My brother will face justice, and you and your mother will get your fresh start. I give you my word." James Wright's penthouse gleamed with ostentatious wealth, crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across marble floors, where New York's elite mingled in blissful ignorance of the drama about to unfold. Lucinda moved through the crowd in her server's uniform, a ghost among the living. The recording device nestled against her ribs felt like a ticking bomb as she arranged canapes on sterling silver trays, her eyes constantly tracking Jonathan, who stood near the windows, champagne glass in hand. His apparent resurrection had caused quite the stir. James's face had drained of color when his brother walked through the door, his practiced smile freezing in place as shock and something darker, fear perhaps, flashed across his features. "Jonathan," he'd managed, embracing his brother with the enthusiasm of a man hugging a specter. "Surprise," Jonathan had replied, his voice pitched for the guest to hear, the perfect blend of amusement and brotherly affection. Only Lucinda could see the deadly intent lurking beneath the polished veneer of civility. Now the brothers circled each other in an elaborate dance, champagne glasses raised in mock toasts, exchanging pleasantries laced with double meanings that sailed over the heads of their oblivious guests. Lucinda moved closer, the microphone capturing every word. "I must say your recovery has been nothing short of miraculous," James commented, his knuckles white around the stem of his glass. "Dr. Wells was quite certain your condition was terminal." Jonathan's smile never reached his eyes as he leaned closer to his brother, voice dropping to a whisper that only the microphone and James could hear. "Thallium poisoning usually is. Lucky for me, I keep antidotes on hand for such brotherly concerns." James's composure slipped for just a fraction of a second before he recovered, a flash of calculation replacing the momentary panic in his eyes. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but perhaps we should continue this conversation in private." The study door closed behind the brothers with an ominous click, leaving Lucinda alone in the hallway, heart hammering against her ribs as she pressed her ear to the wood. The voices inside grew heated, accusations flying like bullets between the men who shared blood and betrayal in equal measure. "You've always been jealous." Jonathan's voice came clearly through her earpiece, the recording device capturing every damning word. "First you poisoned our father against me, then you tried to poison me literally." Footsteps approached from the main hall, a security guard making his rounds, his suspicious gaze landing on Lucinda, who stood frozen by the study door. With quick thinking, she picked up an abandoned champagne glass, pretending to clear it. "The maid," the guard said suddenly, his eyes narrowing as he studied her face. "You're new, aren't you? I don't recognize you from the agency roster." Panic fluttered in Lucinda's chest as she searched for a plausible lie, but before she could speak, the study door swung open and Jonathan emerged, his face a mask of controlled fury. "She's with me," he stated flatly, his hand closing firmly around her wrist. The guard backed away immediately, training overriding curiosity as he retreated down the hallway, leaving Lucinda with Jonathan, whose grip betrayed the rage simmering beneath his composed exterior. "We're leaving," he murmured, steering her toward the service elevator. "What happened?" she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder at the study where James remained. "Did you get what you needed?" Better, Jonathan replied as the elevator doors closed, sealing them in momentary safety. I got him to admit everything. The poisoning, the conspiracy with Dr. Wells, even his plans to take over my territory once I was gone. It's all on record now. Rain began to fall as they exited through the kitchen, fat drops splattering against the pavement in an eerie echo of the night that had brought them together. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a fitting soundtrack to the storm brewing between the Wright brothers. Their driver was waiting 3 blocks away as planned, an inconspicuous sedan with tinted windows that swallowed them into anonymity as soon as they slipped inside. Lucinda's hands trembled as she removed the recording device, passing it to Jonathan, who immediately played back the confession. What happens now? She asked, as the city lights blurred past their windows, the familiar skyline rendered alien by the knowledge that nothing would ever be the same after tonight. What will you do to your brother? Jonathan's face was unreadable in the half-light, his profile carved in shadow as he stared out at the rain-slicked streets. Nothing as merciful as what he planned for me. James will lose everything. His reputation, his freedom, his place in our family. The safe house was a surprise. Not another fortress like the mansion, but a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, its unassuming facade concealing state-of-the-art security systems. No one knows about this place, Jonathan explained as they entered. Not even James. Inside, the warmth was unexpected. A home rather than a hideout with worn leather furniture and bookshelves lining the walls. Lucinda moved through the rooms in quiet amazement, trailing her fingers across spines of well-read classics that seemed at odds with the man she thought she knew. My mother's books, Jonathan explained, noticing her surprise as she pulled a volume of poetry from the shelf. This was her house before she died, the only property I own that isn't connected to the family business. The revelation shifted something between them, a glimpse behind the curtain of power and intimidation that Jonathan wore like armor. Why show me this place? Lucinda asked, suddenly aware of how close they stood in the narrow hallway. Because you saw me at my weakest and chose mercy over advantage, he replied, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. In my world, that kind of compassion is rarer than you can imagine. Dawn broke over Brooklyn, painting the sky in watercolor washes of pink and gold as they sat at the kitchen table, formulating plans over cups of strong black coffee. The recording would be their insurance policy, their protection against James's inevitable retaliation. We need to move your mother immediately, Jonathan said, his fingers flying across a laptop keyboard as he made arrangements. James knows about her facility. He'll try to use her as leverage against you. Lucinda felt cold dread seep through her veins at the thought of her fragile mother, caught in the crossfire of a Mafia war. She can't be moved easily. She has dementia, needs specialized care. Any disruption to her routine could be catastrophic. Jonathan's expression softened with unexpected empathy, his hand covering hers briefly before returning to the keyboard. I know a private facility upstate, discreet, excellent care, and most importantly, unknown to my brother. She'll be safe there until this is over. As they worked through the logistics, a strange companionship formed between them, born of shared danger and tentative trust. Lucinda found herself studying Jonathan's profile when he wasn't looking, wondering at the complexities of a man who could order deaths without remorse, yet ensure a stranger's mother received proper medical care. You're staring, he observed without looking up, a hint of amusement warming his voice. Trying to reconcile the monster from the tabloids with the man who keeps poetry books? Something like that, Lucinda admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. You're not what I expected when I took this job 2 years ago. Jonathan's phone buzzed before he could respond, the screen lighting up with an incoming call that made his expression harden instantly. James, he said grimly, placing the phone on the table between them and activating the speaker. Right on schedule. The conversation was brief, tense, James proposing a meeting to resolve their differences, a transparent attempt to lure Jonathan into a trap. Neutral ground, just the two of us, James insisted, his voice crackling through the speaker with false sincerity. The abandoned ferry terminal at sunset, Jonathan agreed, ignoring Lucinda's alarmed expression. No security, no weapons, just brothers finally settling things like our father would have wanted. The call ended, and Lucinda erupted, her composure finally cracking under the strain of the past few days. That's suicide. He'll have men waiting. He'll finish what he started. You can't seriously be considering meeting him alone. Jonathan's calm was infuriating as he continued typing, apparently unconcerned by the death trap he'd just agreed to walk into. Of course I'm not going alone, he replied, glancing up with a gleam in his eyes that was almost playful. "I'm taking you." The plan he outlined was audacious, dangerous, a high-stakes game of chess where Lucinda would be both pawn and queen. "James doesn't know that you've seen his face on the security footage from my study. He thinks you're just another anonymous staff member. You want me to spy on your brother at the meeting?" Lucinda asked incredulously, trying to follow his logic through the convoluted layers of deception he was constructing. "Why would he let me anywhere near your conversation?" Jonathan's smile was sharp as a blade as he pulled up an architectural schematic of the old ferry terminal. "Because you won't be there as yourself. You'll be there as a ghost. A shadow in the maintenance tunnels beneath the main floor, hearing everything, seen by no one." The abandoned ferry terminal loomed against the sunset like a decaying cathedral, its rusted skeleton silhouetted against flames of orange and crimson that blazed across the harbor. Lucinda shivered despite the warmth of the evening as she followed Jonathan through a service entrance that had clearly been prepared in advance. "Remember, no matter what you hear, stay hidden," he instructed, checking the small recording device concealed in her pocket one final time. "If something happens to me, this recording is your insurance policy. Use it to negotiate with my lieutenant, Michael Grant." The maintenance tunnel was dank and claustrophobic, decades of neglect evident in the crumbling concrete and exposed wiring that hung like diseased veins from the ceiling. Lucinda moved carefully through the darkness, guided only by the small flashlight Jonathan had given her. Above, footsteps echoed as James arrived, his voice carrying clearly through the metal grating that separated Lucinda from the brothers' confrontation. "I'm surprised you came alone," James was saying, his tone conversational as though they were meeting for dinner rather than a potential execution. "Some things should stay between family," Jonathan replied, his voice positioned almost directly above where Lucinda crouched in the darkness. "Like attempted murder, for instance." The conversation escalated quickly, pretenses abandoned as James realized Jonathan had concrete evidence of his betrayal. "You've always been father's favorite," James spat, bitterness dripping from every syllable. "Even from the grave, he makes sure you keep everything while I get the scraps." "Is that what this is about?" Jonathan asked, genuine surprise coloring his voice. "After all these years, you're still fighting for a dead man's approval? I offered you equal partnership a dozen times. You were the one who always refused. Partnership was never enough," James shouted, his voice echoing through the cavernous terminal. "I wanted what was rightfully mine. Control, respect, the legacy father promised me before you turned him against me." A metallic click reverberated through the space, the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. Lucinda's heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed closer to the grating, straining to see what was happening above. "You always were predictable, James," Jonathan said with weary disappointment. "I knew you'd bring a weapon despite our agreement, just like I knew you'd try to poison me when negotiations failed." Something clattered to the floor. James's gun, Lucinda realized, as Jonathan continued speaking in that same controlled voice that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "My men have been in position since before you arrived. One signal from me, and they put a bullet through your skull." Silence stretched between the brothers, taut as a tripwire as James weighed his options. "What do you want?" he finally asked, defeat coloring his voice for the first time. "If you were going to kill me, you'd have done it already. I want you gone, out of New York, out of our business, out of my life," Jonathan replied, each word falling like a stone. "The recording of your confession goes to the FBI unless you disappear. Permanently." James laughed, a bitter sound devoid of humor. "You're giving me exile instead of death? That's not mercy, Jonathan. That's a fate worse than dying. Everything I've built, everyone I know is here, which is exactly why you'll accept my terms," Jonathan countered, his voice hardening. "Because the alternative is a lifetime in a federal prison where your connections can't protect you. Your choice. Disappear by morning or face prosecution." Footsteps echoed again, moving away as James apparently considered the ultimatum. "This isn't over," he called back, his voice fading as he retreated. "You can't watch your back forever, brother." "I won't have to," Jonathan replied cryptically, waiting until the heavy metal door clanged shut behind James before speaking again. "You can come up now, Lucinda. He's gone." She emerged from the maintenance tunnel into the fading light, dust and cobwebs clinging to her clothes as Jonathan extended a hand to help her up. "You recorded everything?" he asked, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Every word," she confirmed, passing him the device with fingers that trembled slightly in the aftermath of adrenaline. "Do you really think he'll leave?" That he won't try again? Jonathan's expression was grim as he pocketed the recording. No, James will never stop. Exile just buys us time to prepare for his next move. But now we have leverage, something to keep him at bay while we dismantle his support network. The ride back to Brooklyn was silent, each lost in their own thoughts, as the city lights blurred past the car windows. Lucinda found herself watching Jonathan's reflection in the glass, noting the weariness that seemed to have settled over him since the confrontation. What happens now? She finally asked as they pulled up to the brownstone, the question encompassing far more than just their next tactical move. To you, to your business, to us. Jonathan's eyes met hers, something vulnerable flickering in their depths before his carefully constructed walls slammed back into place. Now we wait for James to make his choice. Disappear or fight. Either way, we need to be ready. Dawn broke over the brownstone, painting the bedroom walls in watercolor hues of rose and gold. As Lucinda awoke with a start, the house was too quiet, the familiar sounds of Jonathan moving about conspicuously absent as she slipped from beneath the covers. She found him in the kitchen, staring at his phone with an expression that made her blood run cold. "He's gone," Jonathan said, without looking up, his voice curiously flat. James emptied his accounts and disappeared sometime during the night. Relief washed over her, short-lived and quickly replaced by suspicion. "That seems too easy," she ventured, accepting the cup of coffee he offered with hands that weren't quite steady. "He just gave up?" Jonathan's laugh was hollow as he scrolled through what appeared to be security footage on his phone. "James never gives up. He regroups. This isn't surrender. It's tactical retreat. He'll be back when we least expect it." The doorbell shattered the morning stillness, triggering an immediate transformation in Jonathan, who moved with fluid precision to the security panel, weapon appearing in his hand from some hidden holster. The monitor showed a delivery courier shifting impatiently on the porch. "Stay back," Jonathan warned, positioning himself between Lucinda and the door as he checked the security feed one final time before holstering his weapon and accepting the package. His face remained impassive as he examined the plain brown box, turning it over in his hands. "It's from James," he said finally, placing the package on the kitchen counter as if it might contain explosives. His handwriting, no return address, typical dramatic flair. "Let me scan it before we open it." The scanner revealed no electronic components, no biological agents, just a single object nestled in protective foam. Jonathan carefully lifted the lid to reveal an antique pocket watch that made his face drain of color, recognition, and something like pain flashing across his features. "Our father's watch," he explained, lifting it gingerly from the box. "The one possession James truly coveted. Father promised it to him, then gave it to me instead just before he died. It was the final betrayal as far as James was concerned." A small card nestled beneath the watch bore a single line in elegant script. "Consider this my white flag. The war between us ends today." Lucinda watched as Jonathan turned the card over, searching for hidden meanings or threats, finding nothing but that simple declaration. "Do you believe him?" she asked, studying Jonathan's face as he continued to stare at the watch, ticking steadily in his palm, its gold case gleaming in the morning sunlight. Could this really be over? Jonathan closed his fingers around the watch, decision crystallizing in his eyes as he looked up at her. "No, this is James's most calculated move yet, appearing to concede while planning something bigger. The watch is significant. It's a message only I would understand. The pocket watch holds another secret," Jonathan revealed, running his thumb across a nearly invisible seam in the gold casing. "A hidden compartment where our father kept microfilm of sensitive information. James knows I'll check it." When opened, the compartment yielded not microfilm, but a tiny memory card, modern technology hidden within antique craftsmanship. Jonathan's expression darkened as he connected it to his secure laptop, encrypted files populating the screen with financial records, property deeds, and offshore accounts. "These are all the legitimate businesses I've been building over the years," Jonathan explained, scrolling through the files with increasing concern. "James has been tracking my exit strategy, my attempts to go legitimate. He's telling me he knows my endgame." Lucinda studied the documents over his shoulder, recognizing rehabilitation centers, medical research facilities, and affordable housing projects that Jonathan had funded anonymously. "He's threatening your future, not just your past," she observed, understanding dawning in her eyes. "This changes our approach," Jonathan decided, shutting the laptop with quiet resolve. "James isn't just after revenge or territory. He's trying to ensure I can never escape the life, never build something better. That's why the watch with our family motto. He's mocking my attempt to change our legacy." Hours later, they stood in Jonathan's office at the mansion, surrounded by his most trusted lieutenants as they dissected James's possible strategies. Security had been tripled. Lucinda's mother moved to a secure medical facility upstate, and still Jonathan remained on edge. "The pocket watch belonged to our grandfather, who built this family's fortune from nothing," Jonathan explained to the assembled men, the timepiece gleaming under the office lights. The inscription inside reads, "Time reveals all truths, our family motto, and, knowing James, a warning." The attack, when it came, was not the frontal assault they had prepared for, but a silent infiltration that might have succeeded if not for Lucinda's attention to detail. Walking through the east wing, she noticed a cleaning cart abandoned in a hallway where no cleaning had been scheduled. "Jonathan," she whispered urgently into the small communication device he'd given her, backing slowly away from the suspicious cart. "Something's wrong on the 3rd floor. There's equipment that shouldn't be here." His response was immediate. Security teams converging on her location from all directions as alarms blared throughout the mansion. "Get to the panic room," Jonathan commanded, his voice tense through the earpiece. "Now, Lucinda, don't stop for anything." She was halfway to the designated safe room when the first explosion shook the mansion's foundation, plaster raining from the ceiling as smoke began to fill the corridors. Disoriented, choking, she stumbled against the wall as a second blast knocked out the power, plunging the hallway into darkness. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders, pulling her into a side passage as a third explosion rocked the building. "I've got you," Jonathan's voice came from the darkness, his arm encircling her waist as he guided her through the smoke. James rigged the cleaning supplies with incendiary devices. The safe room sealed them in with a pneumatic hiss, emergency lights casting everything in an eerie blue glow as Jonathan activated the security systems with practiced efficiency. "He wasn't trying to kill us," he explained, studying the surveillance feeds. "This was a distraction." Realization dawned in his eyes as he frantically cycled through different camera feeds, stopping on the vault in the basement level. "The ledgers," he muttered, watching as masked figures efficiently cracked the supposedly impenetrable safe. "He's after the only evidence that could truly destroy him." Lucinda watched the silent footage with growing dread, understanding at last what James had planned all along. With those records, he could implicate you in every illegal operation while clearing his own name. The perfect revenge. You lose everything while he walks away clean. Jonathan's face hardened with determination as he began arming himself from the weapons cache concealed in the safe room walls. "I need to stop them before they leave the property. Those records don't just implicate me. They contain information that could hurt innocent people, including you." "You can't go out there alone," Lucinda argued, grabbing his arm as he reached for the door release. "The building's on fire. James's men are everywhere. It's exactly what he wants you to do." Something shifted in Jonathan's expression as he looked down at her hand on his arm, then back to her face, conflict evident in his eyes. "I've spent my entire life fighting to protect what's mine," he said quietly, "but nothing I've built is worth your life." The decision crystallized between them, unspoken but understood, as Jonathan stepped back from the door, returning the weapon to its place on the wall. "Let him have the ledgers. With the recording we made at the ferry terminal, we still have leverage to keep him in check." Hours later, they stood on the mansion's lawn watching as firefighters battled the blaze that had consumed the east wing. The ledgers were gone, along with any trace of James's men who had vanished as quickly as they had appeared. "He thinks he's won," Jonathan said, his voice steady despite the destruction of his family home. "Let him keep thinking that while we build something he can never destroy." Lucinda turned to face him fully, searching his expression for any sign of the ruthless crime lord she had first encountered that rainy night that seemed a lifetime ago. "And what exactly are we building, Jonathan? More power, more enemies, more nights wondering if we'll survive until morning?" His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining with unexpected gentleness. "Something legitimate, something lasting. I've been moving assets into legal ventures for years. Real estate, technology startups, medical research. James never knew because he was too focused on the old ways. A fresh start," Lucinda whispered, barely daring to believe what he was suggesting. "For both of us? For my mother, too?" Jonathan nodded, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames that were consuming his past before them. "The Wright family built its fortune on fear and intimidation. I want to rebuild it on something stronger. Rehabilitation centers, affordable housing, medical facilities for people like your mother." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of change, as Jonathan made good on his promise, dismantling his criminal enterprises piece by piece while strengthening his legitimate businesses. Lucinda found herself at the center of his transformation, her nursing background proving invaluable as they developed plans for a state-of-the-art care facility. News of Jonathan's transformation rippled through New York's underworld, former enemies approaching with cautious alliance offers while others retreated, uncertain how to navigate this unexpected evolution. The power vacuum created by his withdrawal from illicit activities sparked small territorial wars that Jonathan carefully monitored but refused to engage in. Lucinda's mother flourished in the specialized care facility Jonathan had arranged, moments of clarity breaking through her dementia more frequently as stress receded from her life. During one such lucid moment, she squeezed Lucinda's hand and whispered, "You found your path, just not the one we expected." Anonymous donations funded nursing scholarships at the university where Lucinda had once studied, a gesture she discovered only when Jonathan presented her with the foundation's paperwork over dinner one evening. "Second chances shouldn't be limited to us," he explained simply, the tenderness in his eyes still surprising her. The Brownstones' library became their shared sanctuary, books that had belonged to both their mothers now mingling on shelves that spanned generations and worlds. They spent evenings reading aloud to each other, healing old wounds with poetry and prose that spoke of redemption and renewal. Unexpected allies emerged from Jonathan's past, former employees grateful for generous severance packages, business associates relieved by his shift toward legitimacy, even law enforcement officials who silently appreciated the declining crime rates in his former territories. These connections formed an invisible shield around their new life, a network of protection neither had anticipated. The brownstone became their sanctuary, a place where masks could fall away and truth could flourish between them. What had begun as an alliance of necessity evolved into something neither had anticipated, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared purpose, and eventually, love that neither had believed possible. James remained in the shadows, watching from a distance as his brother's transformation captivated the city's attention. The ledgers he had stolen provided insurance, but not the victory he had craved. Jonathan had outmaneuvered him once again by simply letting go of the empire they had fought over. 6 months after the fire, Jonathan and Lucinda stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Wright Rehabilitation Center, built on the very spot where the mansion had once stood. From the ashes of what was destroyed, we create something that heals instead of harms, Jonathan announced to the gathered crowd. Later that evening, as they walked along the Brooklyn waterfront, Jonathan stopped suddenly, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "I've spent my life taking things that didn't belong to me," he said, opening the box to reveal not a ring, but a key. "This time, I'm asking properly. Will you make our arrangement permanent?" Lucinda took the key to the brownstone, to the life they had built together from the most unlikely beginning. "From deadly whispers to new beginnings," she said, a smile spreading across her face as she closed her fingers around the key. "Yes, I will." The sun set over the Manhattan skyline, painting the world in shades of possibility, as Jonathan wrapped his arms around the woman who had saved more than just his life that rainy night. Two broken souls finding wholeness together, proving that even in the darkest circumstances, compassion could light the way forward. In the end, it wasn't power or money or revenge that had truly changed the game. It was the silent maid who had seen the humanity in a monster and the courage to believe in redemption. One whispered plea for help had altered the course of 2 lives forever, transforming enemies into allies and strangers into family. A new chapter was beginning for them both, one written not in the ledgers of criminal enterprises, but in the quiet moments of trust and vulnerability they now shared. The game that had nearly destroyed them was finally over, replaced by something infinitely more valuable, the chance to build a legacy of healing, one act of kindness at a time. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is important for me to continue creating content.